Failures of leadership and judgment with some events that should not have been allowed to take place. Sue Gray's initial verdict on gatherings in Downing Street. Questions for the Prime Minister as the civil servant makes it clear her update is extremely limited given the police investigation. In the Commons, Boris Johnson apologised.
It isn't enough to say sorry. This is a moment when we must look at ourselves in the mirror and we must learn.
By routinely breaking the rules he set, the Prime Minister took us all for fools. He held people sacrificing contempt. He showed himself unfit for office.
How is what's been revealed so far going down with voters?
And I'm sure it wouldn't have happened under previous Prime Ministers and stuff. I don't think they would have been doing it with Theresa May, put it that way.
I would love to believe that he was sorry and he would fix it, but until the next time.
Sue Gray's update has revealed the police are investigating 12 gatherings, 3 of which were attended by Boris Johnson. Also tonight, ministers meet today to decide whether to scrap mandatory COVID vaccinations for NHS workers in England. And after a solitary 100th birthday, thanks to COVID, a celebration to remember for 101st with thousands of cards.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, 7 months after suffering a cardiac arrest, Christian Eriksen's returning to professional football, signing for Brentford on a 6-month contract.
Good evening and welcome to BBC News at 6 from Downing Street. After 2 months, we have finally heard from the civil servant investigating parties at Downing Street during the pandemic, but not her full report. Sue Gray made it clear that due to the police investigation, she's extremely limited in what she can say and has not therefore been able to present, in her words, a meaningful report. But in what she's calling an update on alleged gatherings on government premises, not least the one behind me, she said so far that some of the behaviour is difficult to justify and some events should not have been allowed to take place. There were failures of leadership and judgment in parts of Number 10 and the Cabinet Office, and some staff wanted to raise concerns but felt unable to do so. The update refers to 16 gatherings on government premises. Sue Gray revealed the police is investigating 12 of them, including one in the Prime Minister's own flat. The Prime Minister was present at 3 of them. In the Commons this afternoon, Boris Johnson apologised, promised to make changes to the running of Number 10 and insisted the government can be trusted. The Labour leader, Keir Starmer, said the Prime Minister broke the rules he made and blamed everyone but himself. Here's our political editor, Kuenssberg, with the latest on the investigation update.
It's been a long, uncomfortable wait for Number 10. An official verdict into the government itself breaking the rules. Part 1, at least, has now arrived.
Will you take responsibility, Prime Minister?
There may be no easy Downing Street escape. The blonde head and red box you can spot from the sky, arriving for a moment Boris Johnson's enemies believe could be a reckoning.
Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Speaker.
He started with another apology.
Firstly, I want to say sorry. And I'm sorry for the things we simply didn't get right, and also sorry for the way that this matter has been handled. And it's no use saying that this or that was within the rules, and it's no use saying that people were working hard. This pandemic was hard for everyone.
His penance, though, not changing his own address, but shifting others around.
Mr. Speaker, it isn't enough to say sorry. This is a moment when we must look at ourselves in the mirror and we must learn. We are making changes now to the way Downing Street and the Cabinet Office run, so that we can get on with the job that I was elected to do, Mr. Speaker, and the job that this government was elected to do. Mr. Speaker, I get it, and I will fix it.
The findings are grim for Downing Street. Ms Gray found a serious failure to observe the high standards expected, with too little thought given to what was happening across the country. There were failures of leadership and judgment by different parts of Number 10 and the Cabinet Office. She found excessive consumption of alcohol that's not appropriate in a professional workplace at any time. And some staff who'd wanted to raise concerns about behaviours felt unable to do so. This may not be the full and final version, but the conclusion is clear. A number of these gatherings should not have been allowed to take place or to develop in the way they did. And remember, this is only the initial report into what's emerged week by grisly week about what was going on behind the closed door of number 10.
It wasn't a party, it was cheese and wine. Just be clear, it's not.
Jokes about explaining away the rules.
This fictional party was a business meeting.
Cheese and wine in the garden. Claims of loud music and parties in the flat upstairs. Birthday cake in the cabinet room. The rule setters alleged to be rule breakers while the rest of the country was locked down. In contrast to the Prime Minister's seeming hope to rush through this statement this afternoon, the Leader of the Opposition was brutal and took his time.
By routinely breaking the rules he set, the Prime Minister took us all for fools. He held people sacrificing contempt. He showed himself unfit for office. Prime Minister, the British public aren't fools. They never believed a word of it. They think the Prime Minister should do the decent thing and resign. Of course he won't, because he is a man without shame.
Some ministers hung their heads as the Labour leader appealed to them, to their Tory colleagues, to call time on the Prime Minister. Labour claims is now simply not fit to govern.
They can heap their reputations, the reputation of their party, the reputation of this country on the bonfire that is his leadership. Or they can spare the country from a Prime Minister totally unworthy of his responsibilities. The eyes of the country are upon them. They will be judged by the decisions they take now.
In all the sound and fury at Boris Johnson, the SNP breaking Commons manners.
He misled the House. He must now resign.
Branding him a liar.
That man has misled the House.
A wild ride in the Commons.
Shut up.
Downing Street had hoped the danger was passing. Boris Johnson's lieutenants trying to grab control and shore up angry MPs.
Have you seen Sue Gray's report, Mr Dowden?
But attacks on number 10 from the Tory side were opened by none other than the withering former Prime Minister.
So either my right honourable friend had not read the rules, or didn't understand what they meant, and others around him, or they didn't think the rules applied to number 10. Which was it?
But I'm deeply concerned by these events, and very concerned indeed by some of the things he has said from that dispatch box. And I have to tell him he no longer enjoys my support.
It seems a lot of people attended events in May 2020. The one I recall attending was my grandmother's funeral. I didn't hug my siblings, I didn't hug my parents. I gave a eulogy, and then afterwards I didn't even go to her house for a cup of tea. I drove back 3 hours from Kent to Staffordshire. Does the Prime Minister think I'm a fool?
No, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my honourable friend, and I want to say how deeply I sympathise with him and his family for their loss.
Disbelief on the faces of some of Boris Johnson's own side. Disbelief from some of the public too. The Prime Minister may find this time he isn't able to just bulldoze through.
Well, Laura's with me here. Laura, we've waited weeks and weeks for the report. Today we get a sort of partial version of it. What's your assessment of what you've seen?
Well, I think, Fiona, even though this report and this initial findings was only 12 pages long, there was one really simple and very difficult conclusion for this place. It's that Sue Gray, senior civil servant, someone who's beyond reproach, found lots of evidence of many events and of rule breaking during lockdown at the highest levels of this government, whether that was in this building or in the Cabinet Office or other parts of government. Some of those inquiries are now being passed on to the police, with them investigating a dozen events. And we understand 3 of those events were ones that the Prime Minister himself may indeed have intended. So even though this is only the first version of what Sue Gray's put out there in the public domain, I don't think that diminishes its importance. It's an official verdict that what started a couple of months ago is Downing Street dismissing and saying, oh, this is all nonsense, none of this happened. We now have, in black and white, a government official saying, actually, these things did go on. And Boris Johnson had a very brutal afternoon in the House of Commons this afternoon. Even one former Chief Whip, a senior MP, Andrew Mitchell, a Conservative, standing and saying that he no longer has his support. Boris Johnson's meeting all of his MPs in the Commons round about now, and it felt very torrid, pretty wild in the Commons. In the last few days, his supporters have been feeling that they've been managing to hold things up and shore it up. But it's a very, very turbulent town for Downing Street indeed.
OK, Laura, well, for now, thank you. We'll talk to you a little bit later on the programme for the latest. Thank you. Well, as we've heard, today's report by Sue Gray is not the full findings MPs had been expecting after the Metropolitan Police asked her to keep to a minimum any references to events it is now investigating. But we have learned that the police are looking into 12 alleged gatherings, including one in the Prime Minister's flat. So what can we expect from the police inquiry and when? Daniel Sanford reports.
The departure of Dominic Cummings from Downing Street in November 2020. 2 gatherings held on the day he left are among those now under investigation by Scotland Yard. Detectives examining whether the Prime Minister and his staff were breaking the lockdown rules that they themselves had written. So which events are the police investigating? They're looking at 12 gatherings on 8 different dates, from the infamous Bring Your Own Booze event on May the 20th, 2020 during the first lockdown, to 2 leaving do's on the same day in April 2021. 8 of the events were in Downing Street and 4 in the neighbouring Cabinet Office. 1 was in the Prime Minister's own flat.
We had a bundle of material provided to us just Friday, which is well over 500 of pieces of paper, about a ream and a half we received, and over 300 photographs. So we've just received that, and my officers are prioritising this week to consider what's been provided in that bundle of material, what further investigations that they need to do, and of course who they're going to be contacted.
And who might get fined? Well, that's not yet clear. Detectives will be writing to dozens of staff in Downing Street and the Cabinet Office, asking for their accounts of the gatherings and whether they had a reasonable excuse for their actions. Although the maximum penalty for these alleged offences is only a small fine, detectives here say they will be fast-tracking the investigation, and it should be over in a matter of weeks rather than months. But how damaged are the Metropolitan Police after being caught in this political storm? They've been accused of not intervening to stop the alleged parties at the time, and then getting in the way of the publication of Sue Gray's full report by asking for the details not to be published.
I understand the frustrations. I feel frustrated. What's important, though, is I don't allow my frustrations to interfere with an independent police investigation.
The force said today that it knew its actions around the alleged Downing Street parties had divided opinion, but it said it had to take difficult decisions, even when to do so was contentious. Daniel Sanford, BBC News at New Scotland Yard.
Well, whatever the police and MPs make of today's developments so far, it's the verdict of voters which matters in the end. Our political correspondent Chris Mason has been speaking to people in the constituency of Southend West in Essex, which is due to hold a by-election on Thursday. The seat had been held by Sir David Amos, who was fatally stabbed while giving advice to his constituents in October.
For more than 70 years, this corner of Essex on the northern side of the Thames estuary has elected Conservative MPs. For nearly 25 years, the MP was Sir David Amos. People here must now choose his successor amid the noise of the row engulfing Boris Johnson.
The culture was all wrong, and I'm sure it wouldn't have happened under previous Prime Ministers and stuff. I don't think they would have been doing it with Theresa May, put it that way.
Now that Boris Johnson is saying sorry, now he's saying he gets it, he's going to fix it. Any forgiveness for him?
How many times has he said sorry and I get it over the last 2 or 3 years? I'm sorry, I would love to believe that he was sorry and he would fix it, but till the next time.
At Whitehall Bowling Club, they remember their former MP fondly. Many, though, but not all, don't hesitate to criticise the Prime Minister.
Conservative people that want to vote will look at that not only do they not believe what they say, they don't care about the common person.
What we've got going on in the world at the moment with Ukraine, I really feel that the party issue is a non-event.
I'm going to roll the ball to Freddie.
In Lee Community Centre, it's yoga in one room, a parent and toddler session in another. We're 40 miles from Westminster here, but it can feel further. The cost of living more important to Louise running this class than parties in government.
I don't see any relationship with the by-election and the parties at all. I think it's very, very separate. So in terms of what's happening within Leigh-on-Sea at the moment with the by-election, I wouldn't even consider the parties. I think it's very different.
This is a strange by-election because the main opposition parties aren't fielding candidates out of respect for Sir David Amos. What is striking is while the well of support for the Conservatives runs deep here, this has been, for a lot of people, an unforgettable episode in Boris Johnson's time as Prime Minister. For many, it has damaged him.
On Thursday, people here will deliver their verdict. Plenty more will get a chance in local elections in May. Chris Mason, BBC News, in Leigh-on-Sea.
And you can get a full list of all the candidates standing in that by-election, as well as analysis on today's developments on the BBC website. The time has just gone 6:15. Our top story this evening. Questions for the Prime Minister as the civil servant investigating gatherings in Downing Street finds there were failures of leadership and judgment. And coming up, thousands of homes are still without power after storms batter parts of Scotland.
Coming up on the BBC News Channel, the January transfer window closes tonight. We'll bring you the latest movements from the Premier League and across Europe as clubs desperately try to finish those last-minute deals.
Ministers have been meeting today to decide whether to scrap mandatory COVID vaccinations for NHS workers in England. Around 77,000 staff still haven't had a jab, although not all of those will be in contact with patients. The deadline for the first jab is Thursday. Unions have warned that the policy could lead to staff shortages when services are under extreme pressure. Here's our health editor, Hugh Pym.
It's proved to be a highly controversial policy. NHS staff in England told they must get vaccinated with the first dose by Thursday, and the prospect of thousands leaving if they refuse. But now the government is poised to scrap the policy. Catherine, who's a midwife, told me last week she didn't want to be forced to have the jabs.
I feel very strongly about bodily autonomy and people's right to make choices about what they put in their body or what medical treatment they accept.
She expected to lose her job, so she was relieved to hear the news today.
I'm very, very happy to hear that the government is taking a look at current events. It means that myself and others like me can continue to provide care for families in a situation where staffing is already very low. I'm glad they're looking at this again to prevent an even further staffing crisis occurring.
Hospital managers and senior doctors have been trying to push on with the policy, having sometimes very difficult discussions with members of staff about the need to get vaccinated. So there may be some frustration if the policy is going to be dropped. There's relief that the predicted departure of some health workers is unlikely to happen, but irritation at the way the prospect of a U-turn has been communicated.
To explain to NHS leaders through the front page of a national newspaper of this major change in policy, a policy that the government has set last autumn, is no way to communicate with leaders. It's no way to communicate with frontline NHS workers. So that's the principal source of frustration.
At Derby and other hospitals, they say they'll continue to urge staff to get vaccinated to help protect patients.
It's a privilege and an honour to work in the health service and look after patients. And one of those stipulations for me is I have to be vaccinated in order to do that.
A similar policy mandating vaccinations for those working in social care in England was imposed. It was predicted thousands would leave the profession.
It just epitomises the government's position on social care. They've trialled it, despite the fact we had more vacancies at that time than the NHS has now. And yet they didn't listen to the same mitigations, the same arguments. They were put aside.
Now it's down to ministers to explain their thinking. It's understood one argument for a change is that Omicron is not as severe as the Delta wave, during which the policy was first announced. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Tens of thousands of homes have been without power for another day after two storms battered parts of Scotland. The electricity network in the northeast area and the Highlands was worst affected after winds gusted more than 90 miles an hour. Alexandra Mackenzie reports.
The clear-up is underway. Storm Malik, followed by Storm Corrie, pummeled the north of Scotland, particularly here in Aberdeenshire. Driving conditions were treacherous. Several lorries were blown onto the grassy verge. Thousands are without electricity, including the town of Stonehaven. Help is being given to those in need.
We didn't have any electricity for 6 days in November, so this is us again. So
it's more for the older people that I think it's been worse for. And we've got a lot of older customers, so obviously they've been stuck inside today and not got out. So, yeah.
Without power, most shops remain closed.
The town centre today is a little bit of a ghost town. We've not been able to trade today, had to send members of staff home. It's the unknown.
Our car was parked over just under the roof over there.
Scott was woken to find slates had blown from his roof onto his new car.
The lights were flickering, the wind was blowing, it was pretty gusty. We knew it was going to be a bad one. And yeah, I was in bed, we were both in bed, and it was about 12:30, and we just heard the biggest crash. It was right outside our bedroom window, and we just pretty much knew what exactly had happened. Gutted.
Yeah.
Gutted.
Many in the northeast are expected to spend another night with no power. Alexandra Mackenzie, BBC News, Stonehaven.
Let's take a brief look at some of today's other news. And the United States have prepared a list of people in or near President Vladimir Putin's inner circle to punish with sanctions if Russia sends troops into Ukraine. Earlier, the UN Security Council met to discuss Russia's troop build-up. At the meeting, Russia's ambassador to the United Nations said the United States' talk of war was provocative. Police have been granted more time to question Manchester United footballer Mason Greenwood. The 20-year-old footballer was arrested on suspicion of rape and assault yesterday. Manchester United have said the player will not return to training or matches until further notice. Nike says it's suspended its relationship with the player. Tesco is set to scrap hundreds of jobs as it axes meat, fish and deli counters in 317 stores. The company said it would also be closing its discount chain Jack's. Brentford have signed Danish midfielder Christian Eriksen on a 6-month deal. Eriksen has not played since suffering a cardiac arrest during Denmark's match against Finland at Euro 2020 last June. He was subsequently fitted with a pacemaker. He's previously talked of his aspirations of resuming his playing career for Denmark in the World Cup later this year. Now, when Edna Clayton reached the milestone age of 100 last year, COVID restrictions meant she spent the day alone in her flat. But this year it's a different story. Her 101st birthday has been marked by a celebration in her care home with thousands of cards and some rather special messages, as our Scotland correspondent Lorna Gordon has been finding out.
Happy birthday, Edna. What a milestone.
Edna Clayton, 101 today. After spending her 100th alone, staff here were determined to make this birthday special.
I've never seen anything like it in my life.
An appeal for cards going viral, with more than 30,000 from around the world. Have you got a message to everybody who sent you these cards?
What can I say to you all? You see how I'm placed? And I love every one of you. Get a cuddle.
Edna has dedicated her life to looking after her son James. Separated for much of lockdown, the two were together for her special day.
Edna, this is your card from the Queen.
Amongst all the cards, this was one that for Edna stood out. From the Queen to someone many consider comedy royalty. We've got a special message from someone we've been told you're a big fan of.
Hello, Edna. I'd like to wish you a happy birthday. 101, that's spectacular. Well done.
Oh, Billy Charlie!
I hope you're having a great time and you don't get too drunk. And don't stay out too late dancing tonight.
He looks younger every day.
There was dancing and singing too. At Edna's request, a party bus to see the streets where she used to live. A year late, but this a birthday to remember. Lorna Gordon, BBC News, Glasgow.
Well, let's return to our main story tonight and the publication of Sue Gray's initial findings into Downing Street and Whitehall parties during lockdown. A full report has been held back pending the current police investigation. Our special correspondent Ed Thomas has been speaking to people in Lee in Greater Manchester, one of the so-called red wall seats, which had been a Labour stronghold but voted for Boris Johnson in 2019. What do they make of it?
Hundreds of miles from Westminster, but the shadow of number 10 and lockdown parties looms large. And now the truth is coming out. And for many, it hurts.
He was a bus driver who worked all through the pandemic. And it's the third time he had COVID. He'd already had it twice before and then he got it again.
Philip's brother died 3 weeks ago. Another family suffering during the pandemic.
A lot of people, family, brothers, sisters, husbands, wives have died on their own with total strangers, and they're having parties. Something's seriously going wrong in this country.
You voted for Boris Johnson?
Yes, I did.
What did you expect?
Not that. I expected somebody with a bit of decency.
He's apologised. He has said sorry previously.
We can all apologise. We can all go through life, keep apologising.
The promise here in 2019 was to cut through, level up in Lee's favour. But the talk right now is wine, cheese and parties.
When you hear of failures in the Sue Gray report, is that a priority for you right now in your life?
Not really, no. I'm concerned about my job security, the bills I have to pay. You know, the fact that I work very hard, my wife works very hard. We have nothing to show for it. We work to survive.
I find it very, very difficult to have faith in the government.
You voted Conservative in 2019. Can Boris Johnson win your trust back?
He can. He'll have to work very hard to win it back.
For the first time, lockdown party facts have been revealed. And for some, there's painful memories.
This is my mother-in-law, Sandra Smith, and she had 3 appointments cancelled on her. And she sadly passed away in a home alone with nobody with us and was found like that. But it's just like they're laughing in our faces. It's like, it doesn't matter. They can't do anything to us anyway. What are they going to do? They'll get away with it. Yeah. It's how a lot of people feel.
What is your trust levels like in our government, in politicians?
0.
Finally, the truth is emerging. And many are struggling to forgive and forget. Ed Thomas, BBC News, Lee.
Let's get a final word from our political editor, Laura Kuenssberg, who's here with me. So, Laura, we finally had at least the initial findings of Sue Gray's report. Boris Johnson made a statement to a pretty fractious House of Commons. How strong is his position tonight?
I think it's very tricky indeed. I mean, his allies have been busy shoring up support over the weekend and, of course, today, and they don't believe that anything has happened today that fundamentally means he's in immediate danger. That said, he's given a promise that he's going to change. He's going to make some changes here in Downing Street. And there are some MPs who've already said publicly they want to see evidence of that. In a sense, they've put him on notice. And there are other Conservative MPs. And remember why they have the power here. They're the ones with the power to actually try to trigger a vote of no confidence that could theoretically see him have to leave his post. But there are Conservative MPs tonight now who are saying to me things like, he's back in trouble. There is no escape from this. There's the pending police investigation. There's still questions about his own role, particular questions about that party alleged to have taken place in the flat above Downing Street. I think that Boris Johnson's idea he'd be able to skip through this today is something that is just simply not going to happen. And plenty of Tories are questioning whether or not he really managed to get the tone right in the House of Commons this afternoon. So the danger isn't past.
All right, Laura, for now, thank you very much indeed. Right, let's get away from all things here at Downing Street and take a look at the weather with Susan Powell. Hi, Susan.
Thank you, Fiona. Good evening. You saw earlier in the programme some of the damage caused by the storms of the weekend, and we've had lots of scenes in like these as well from our weather watchers. You notice some snow there on the ground in the Highlands. It's turned much colder as we've seen Corrie diving down, now sitting in the Mediterranean. It's also, though, become much quieter. The winds have fallen light, but another area of low pressure will roll through to the far north of the UK for Tuesday, and the winds will kick up once again. Actually, overnight tonight, though, those westerly winds will be ushering in much milder air. So temperatures for many of us coming up overnight, although across easternmost England there is a chance of an early frost. But I think temperatures should push up by the end of the night. There you see the cold air being ushered away. Here we are in much milder air for Tuesday. But there's that low to the north of the UK. And that means, again, for northern Scotland, the potential for gusts of wind up to 80 miles per hour in exposure. Northern Scotland will pick up a few showers, I think, but the best of the sunshine across the northern half of the UK on Tuesday. But strong gusts even further south too. More cloud around here, courtesy of a weather front, and some patchy light rain or drizzle. But what a difference in the temperatures, highs of 12 or 13 through Tuesday. Wednesday, we stay in the mild air, this big dome, if you like, sitting across us from the south. Quite a lot of cloud sitting across the UK and some patchy rain coming in. But then through Thursday, we see some more meaningful rain diving its way south, courtesy of this weather front. Finally, perhaps some rain for southern England. And then Friday, you saw the blue edging across the chart. We're back into the colder air. So quite a seesaw through the course of this week. It remains windy throughout, but fairly mild westerlies in the short term. Back into a colder wind with a chance of some snow showers in the north for Friday. Fiona.
Susan, thanks very much. And that is all from the BBC News at 6 here in Downing Street. It's goodbye from me, and on BBC One. We now join the BBC's news teams where you are. Bye-bye.